To part 2 of media ethics, where we've been looking at ethics principles and ethical approaches. We've covered virtue ethics and duty ethics, and now we're going to focus on consequentialist ethics. And as you should know by now, that's the idea that we focus on outcomes rather than the process, but on outcomes or consequences, and do actions that maximize happiness and minimize harm. As you know, we associate this with John Stuart Mill as well as Bentham, and it's the whole idea that you should act by following the moral rule that will bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So you really kind of take the individual out of it and look at the community and what's going to spread the greatest good. And here's my obligatory graphic of Mill. Seek the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Now here's an example that I've put together. It involves New York Magazine, and it's from about 2 years ago, and it's called Cosby the Women. And so what you see here are all the women who have come forward with their stories about Bill Cosby. As you know, they can range from anywhere of sexual assault to just, drugging them without their permission. And you see we have one lone unseated chair, and that represents a woman who did not want to reveal her identity. And I suggest to you that this was published with kind of a utilitarian perspective, and that it is sharing the women's story, giving them a voice that they have muted for quite some time, because many of these stories date back to the 1970s and span throughout the decades. And so the reason many of the women did not come forward earlier is because they didn't feel like anyone would believe them, and they really couldn't speak truth to power. Okay, so I suggest that maybe this was a utilitarian publication because it provides the greatest happiness, or I should say more, the greatest satisfaction for the greatest good. Now, of course, I'm sure Bill Cosby wasn't thrilled by something like this, but when you're looking at the community, you really can't take in the interests of one or two individuals. Now here, this one's a little more fun. I offer this to you as an example, and this is my wording, utilitarian Barbie. Most of us probably grew up with Barbies that, kind of followed this unattainable figure and, physique. So the makers at Mattel have come up with this kind of, diversity in Barbie approach.
It's important for Barbies to look different. Like the real people in the world.
This is radical because we're saying that there isn't this narrow standard of what a beautiful body looks like.
When I look at the line now, one is taller than original Barbie, one is more petite, and one is curvier.
It's going to be so much fun for the girls to really pick out dolls that they can relate to, and that they connect with.
I like them because this one looks like me and this one looks like my mom. This one looks like my friend Non. Her name is Non.
They're seeing the differences amongst their friends and family being celebrated.
We have to let girls know it doesn't matter what shape you come in, that anything is possible.
When I grow up, I want to be a teacher if I have time. I like being a scientist. That makes me feel like I can do anything.
This is what our future looks like because this is what the world looks like.
It's kind of cool to have people look different. These dolls look like everyone I see walking by at the path of Wonderland.
I thought that was kind of what we mean by the greatest good for the greatest number of people. All right, we're going to conduct a little case study here, and this is the kind of thing you'll see a little bit later on in our assignment. I'm going to show you some photographs that were used in various newspapers from the Boston Marathon bombing. And so as we look through each of the 4 photographs, I want you to think about, which of these photographs would Aristotle have chosen? Which would Kant have chosen? And what about Mill? Some of them are very graphic. Some of them are very disturbing. Some of them may come across as a little bit more respectful. Anyway, let's just take a look. And we won't engage in a case study right now, but this is just something to think about as you're reading about the ethical approaches. This last one is kind of interesting because I've seen this picture in a number of different newspapers, and not all have the knee pixelated like that. Otherwise, it's kind of an open, bloody wound. So thinking back on these pictures, which one do you think Aristotle would have chosen? Most likely, I think there's probably at least 2, perhaps 3 choices. Which one would Kant have chosen? Which one would Mill have chosen? So think about that, and you'll have a similar kind of exercise coming up as your next assignment.